I think we're live.
I think so. So hi, I'm Cheryl.
I'm Victor.
And I'm John Meisel.
And welcome to the repository.
So we invited John to have a discussion today to see where the effort with the West Villagers for Responsible Government, how that started and where we are today.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. So West Villagers for Responsible Government, the genesis was actually a result of the city of Northport wanting to raise our taxes 30% year over year for ad valorem millage rates. Fortunately, Victor became aware of this, made other residents such as myself and others aware of what we perceive as a travesty and an abuse of fiduciary responsibility by the city commissioners. And we showed up en masse at a commission hearing. As a result of that, the commissioners acquiesced, realizing that it was not going to be taken lightly. And they reduced their increase from almost 30% to just under 14%.
But you said that this was going to be year after year, this raise?
No, this was just 1 year from 2019, 2020.
Okay.
So they reduced it to just under 14%. But instead of being good, fiscally responsible fiduciary stewards of our monies, the taxpayers' monies, instead of making the cuts in their annual budget to compensate for the lack of the 16% that they planned for in their budget, they decided to take the easy path, and that being, we're going to reach into our general reserve fund to make up that 16%. And while we left there with a little bit of pride and success and feeling that we had accomplished the goal, we also left with a great deal of disappointment and befuddlement as to why in the world would they not make any cuts?
What answer did you come up with?
Well, there was no answer because they passed the budget. It was done. It was a done deal.
Yeah, I remember there was the mayor interrupted the meeting because people were very
vocal. Right. So So we walked away from that, and as a small group, and when I say small, I think our original group had 8, and we've grown to over 20 active participants of West Villagers for Responsible Government. But when you look at the holistic picture, it's just not just the 20 of us; it's the entire community.
Yeah,
everybody that signed a petition, whether it be for contraction or for referendum or send in donations, we together are a team. It's just that individuals like myself and Victor, David Fernstrom, Mike Milak, I mean, the list goes on, and I leave somebody out, but I don't want to offend anybody. But at the end of the day, we all are fighting for the common goal to rid ourselves of the fiscal irresponsibility of the city of Northport with our taxpayer dollars.
That's correct. So it was a movement, actually, grassroots movement, which was started by a few, but now it's embraced by thousands of people in West Villages. So it started as a fiscal responsibility, but it's governance responsibility. It's wide. It's not only financial. It's how you treat your citizens, how you listen and give them the rights to vote on matters that matters to them.
And there's a perception by many that we're doing this only to save tax dollars. Nothing can be further from the truth.
Yeah, I got it.
We don't mind. I know you got it, but there's a lot of people out there that think we're doing it only to put an extra quarter in our pocket. That's not the case at all. Had the city acted fiscally responsible, they would have never opened Pandora's box and released the serpent, that serpent being West Villagers for Responsible Government, because now we're rearing our ugly head. And albeit it's taken a long time, there have been a lot of battles for which we won every single battle.
That's right, in court.
But we haven't won the war yet, and that's soon to come. There'll be a communication coming out to the entire communities about what the next steps are in the next couple of days. And I'll let them know about what's going on with the legislation that was introduced, as well as keep them abreast that not only do they need to be active and cognizant of what's going on within the city of Northport, they also need to know what's going on within the West Villages Improvement District.
Correct. And I would like you to talk a little bit because what has happened with the developers. Yeah, we have in this case in West Villages, the majority landowner is a foreign entity, Matami Corporation, which sued the grassroots organization, wasting resources of the community to do the right thing. So if you can comment on those lawsuits and what happened, how did they stand in court?
So again, we're going back to 2020 now, almost 3 years ago.
Yep.
And that's when we submitted our first petition for contraction. And before the ink was even dried on the seal of it being filed, the developers filed a lawsuit trying to stop us, the citizens, taxpayers, registered voters, from exercising our constitutional rights
Two of them.
afforded us under Florida Statute 171.
But wouldn't it be two of your United States constitutional rights, the right to petition your government as well as the right to vote?
No, they were trying to block our ability to petition for annexation.
That's right.
Right?
That was
The referendum is further down the road, so
Right.
we haven't gotten there yet. So, end of the day is the court held a hearing, and they spent thousands of dollars, and this was even before the city had done their study of feasibility with Communilytics and held a hearing. So in the course of that 6-month period from the time we submitted our petition to our hearing date in April of 2021, the developer filed 2 suits, and each time the court ruled in our favor. He said, hey, look, this statute has been around since 1869, almost 150 years. Now, whether or not you have vested rights or not, you as a billion-dollar company, a multi-billion-dollar international company, if you fail to do your due diligence to understand the statutes in Florida and whether or not the land that you were purchasing and making an investment in may fall under the umbrella of this statute and could be potentially considered for contraction, that's on you.
That's right.
It's not on the citizens and their ability to execute their rights to petition and ask the court for relief. So twice they ruled in our favor.
And I wanted to ask you what's been on my mind. Do you think that this was a real concern of the developers and they really thought they'd win in court, or was it merely a slap?
Oh, no, it was a concern. It's still a major concern.
Okay.
And let me give you a couple examples of why it's a major concern. They have entered into agreements, not only with the city, but also with the district, which are certainly much more favorable to them as developers than they are to either the city or the residents. And I'll give you an example. One is the irrigation rates that they adopted in 2018 in violation of Florida Statute 189, which the court has already ruled that it's in violation because we as a community sought an injunction challenging those rates. And again, the court ruled in our favor. Now, what did that mean? It mean it voided not only the resolution, but all trailing instruments, which included a 100-year agreement that the developer signed with their developer-controlled district board for 100 years that would have paid them an estimated $2.88 billion over the course of 100 years.
Over the 100. Correct.
The judge referred to it as absurdly obscene, a monopoly, an annuity. He goes, and there's other words I'd like to use, but I can't in public.
Correct. And
So that's just one example. Another example that I just discovered is an agreement, the water utilities agreement between the city of Northport, the district, the developer-controlled district, and the developer. There are things called ERCs, equivalent residential connections. It's synonymous with impact fees for sewer and water. In those agreements, the developer is the financial beneficiary in perpetuity for all ERCs to be collected.
So just to give you the sphere, we are now, let's say, 6,000. The projected would be up to 17,000. The other are in the county, so they don't have the.
No, but if they're if they're using
The city water,
services,
correct.
they
So,
are ERCs.
so you are right, up to 27,000. So there are more than 20,000 ERCs which would benefit the developer.
And what's an ERC?
An equivalent residential connection. So one home,
Which are expensive.
which and today for sewer and water is $4,575.
So multiply that $5,000 with 20,000 and you'll find another $1 billion there.
No, it's not a billion. But
100.
but what happens though is if you take that 5,000 and we'll just call it 20,000,
Okay.
comes out to 10 million or 100 million. Comes out to 100.
100, that's what I'm
100
saying,
million. But if you take the rule of 7, and that's over 20 years, right?
Until the development is finished.
Which is 20 years.
Could be
Okay.
20.
So 20 years, 100 million. The rule of 72 means money doubles every 7 years. So in 7 years, it then becomes 200. And another 7 years, it then becomes 400.
In 20 years.
So when you talk about the 2.8 billion, you're absolutely right. If they took that money and invested it, just like the return they would have gotten on their well availability fee. Oh, by the way, that $2.88 billion that they were getting in the irrigation agreement resolution was only for having the availability, not providing any water, not paying for any of the pumps or anything else, but having it there at the ready.
In case you need it.
In case you need it.
So it's
And the way they
just like an insurance.
And the way they calculated is they said, okay, if you were to use 100% well water for the entire day or entire month or entire year, we're going to burden you the same rate. So we were actually paying double for the availability instead of the usage.
So yeah, so there is another benefit because the way they dealt with the city, not only about the irrigation agreement, but the way they developed the land, there are higher densities in the city versus the county. So that's another.
And nobody knows
Benefit.
any of this information, nor do they care probably because they've been very at City Hall and some of the groups are involved and have been very successful in dividing.
Well, I mean, a lot of residents west of the Mayaca are well aware of what's going on.
Correct.
It's the other side, and I don't blame them for being opposed to our efforts, because quite frankly, if I lived on the other side of Mayaca, I would be in opposition to it too, because at the end of the day, when we succeed, and we will succeed,
Yes, you will.
there's going to have to be some draconian changes and cuts, or as the city acknowledged in their feasibility study from Unalytics, they're going to have to raise
The
their taxes 30%, as if, wait a minute, why is 30% so bad? You had no problem looking at it and doing it in 2019, but now that we want to exercise our constitutional right because you improperly annex lands to feed your tax-based growth and satisfy municipal developers, that's completely wrong.
What a lot of misinformation was broadcasted, and I understand the city, citizens, but just truth to be told, nobody voted for annexation as it was in the media last year. Nobody in Northport voted. Actually, Alice White wrote as a citizen opposing the annexation to she's the vice mayor right now, correct? I don't know, but I think she is. The Lakeland court, when they pronounced the verdict for the annexation in 2001, when the county sued the city, at that time, Mrs. White, Commissioner White, Vice Mayor White, has written to the court not to annex because of the impact on the environment and other things. So nobody voted, contrary to what was broadcasted, and this was established to have been illegal once up to actually a appellate court. What happened, and people have to know about the history, the county then, they got in kumbaya with the city, and they said, we have these interlocal agreements, which lasted from 2001 to 2006. And in 2007, the city even didn't sign that interlocal agreement. They re-annexed, trampling the same criteria, legal criteria. And we are finding that, yes, it was done illegal twice.
Yeah, so again, 2020, the developers went to the county and asked to have the lands rezoned with greater density. The county said no.
2020?
I'm sorry, year 2000.
2000.
In the year 2000, they asked for greater density.
Okay.
Sarasota County said no. Well, we will give you a one home per 5 acres, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the greater density, the more value your property's worth. So the developers then went to the city of Northport and did a voluntary annexation request, for which they agreed. The county then sued them, filed a writ of certiorari, no different than we've done every time the city's made a mistake. The court ruled in their favor. The city appealed it to the Second District Appellate Court. The appellate court upheld the lower court's ruling, saying that the annexation was improper because it wasn't contiguous and it wasn't compact. And then before the ink was even dried on that appellate decision, the city went through and did another ordinance of voluntary contraction. But as Victor alluded to, they then entered into a interlocal agreement because the commissioners on Sarasota County had just recently changed and they were more developer friendly. They entered into an interlocal agreement absolving the county of having to provide any services or anything like that. And that was what West Village's Improvement District. So they petitioned the local legislation for which they could issue bonds, have the residents pay for the infrastructure, which, by the way, the annexation agreement with the city of Northport mandated that the legacy citizens of Northport will never spend a dime on any of the infrastructure or services associated with West Village's Improvement District, for which they haven't.
Yeah, and it was issued, it was not finalized till about 3 years ago, that post-annexation.
That's the post-annexation. That's when after
post-annexation.
So that was in 2000. You had the annexation agreement with the developers. Then you had the establishment of the West Villages Improvement District. Then you had the recession. Then you had Mattamy come in 2014 and purchase 8,600 acres for $82 million, which is the equivalent of about $10,000 an acre. That land is going now for $150,000 an acre, which I don't begrudge anybody making a profit. That's what this world turns on. It's capitalism. It's the almighty dollar. However, what they've done in abusing that authority and power by having the majority land ownership representation on the district is just wrong. It's improper. I've actually filed a complaint against every single one of my peers, supervisors, with the Board of Ethics in the state of Florida for violation of 5 different ethics code violations. And one of the representatives actually has 10 because she was around when they first passed the resolution in 2018 for the irrigation rates. That's just the first salvo. There's many more salvos to come. Until they're held accountable, until everyone's transparent, until everyone can see where the money's going. This ERC agreement for the water utilities agreement that I spoke about previously, had they structured that agreement where the developer would be the beneficiary of all ERC funds up and until they were reimbursed for any a deficit funding that the developers provided with an associated cost of money, because again, there's nothing wrong with a profit. And then any future ERCs would then go towards the improvement district to pay off bonds, I'd have been happy with. But they didn't do that. They set themselves up to rob Peter and rob Paul and rob everybody of funds to pad their wallets. And I am not a supporter of what I think, in my opinion, I would call theft.
And, before we take our first break, that is what I'm always trying to stress. It's not necessarily about the money in your pocket. It's about irresponsible government.
Well, more even than that, because you articulated this district, the legislation allowed for the supervisor at this moment in time, at this stage of development, to be nominated in a landowner election, which is technically assured their seat.
Which by the way, is afforded them under the statute 189. That's how
Correct.
special districts, and then once you reach density requirements. However, last year, in 2022, their calculation was 6% of urban density. The prior year, we were at 20%.
Almost 20%.
Yeah. So how in the world do you go from 20 to 6 with all the building that's going on?
Well, it's wrong.
Well, I know, but it's because they are in control and they have 4 seats. They abuse their power and they change the calculation for which is determined, which when you read the statute, 189.041 is very explicit that preserves, roads, wetlands,
Roads,
I said roads,
rivers,
lakes, etc., are to be considered as part of urbanized area.
Correct. So by that calculation last year, because I was on your seat last year, I said, using this formula, this district will never be passed on to the residents, will be in perpetuity in the hands of developers, which is not the intention of the law. So it's all a flawed calculation. And I requested to be captured in the minutes, which will be available in June. And, hopefully something will happen this year.
Let's take our first break.
Okay.